You're scrolling, again. Another face, another voice, another promise telling you how to live your life. And yet, deep down, there's a quiet discomfort you can't shake. Not loud enough to alarm you, but persistent enough to follow you everywhere. Because if you're being honest with yourself, there's something missing. Not money. Not validation. Not even love from others. It's something far more uncomfortable to admit. You don't fully respect yourself. And the worst part? You've learned to live with it. You smile when you need to. You show up when expected. You give, you sacrifice, you care, sometimes more than anyone else in your life. But when the room is quiet, when there's no one left to impress, you feel it. That emptiness. That subtle voice whispering, "Why am I not enough for myself?" This is the part no one talks about. You were taught how to love others. You were taught how to chase approval. You were taught how to fit in, to belong, to be accepted. But no one taught you how to stand alone and still feel complete. No one taught you how to choose yourself, without guilt. So you've been living in contradiction. You give love, but you don't feel it within. You seek attention, but it never satisfies you. You achieve things, but somehow, it's never enough. And the truth is harsh, but necessary. If you don't learn to love yourself more than anyone else, you will spend your entire life begging for what you should already have. Not out loud, but in your actions. In your silence. In the way you tolerate less than you deserve. This is where most people lose themselves. They think self-love is soft, optional, something to think about later. But the ancient Stoics understood something most people today ignore. Your relationship with yourself is the foundation of everything. If that foundation is weak, nothing you build on top of it will last. Not your relationships. Not your confidence. Not your peace. Everything will eventually collapse under the weight of your own doubt. And that's why this matters. Because this isn't just about feeling good. This is about reclaiming control over your life. This is about becoming someone who doesn't chase validation, but becomes the source of it. Someone who doesn't fear being alone, because they've mastered their own mind. Someone who doesn't settle, because they know their worth is not negotiable. But before we go deeper, I want you to do something simple. If you're ready to stop living for everyone else, and start building a life where you are enough, subscribe to this channel. Because what you're about to hear isn't surface-level motivation. It's a shift. And once it clicks, you won't see yourself, or the world, the same way again. Now listen carefully. Because the journey to loving yourself more than anyone else, doesn't start with confidence. It starts with a brutal realization most people spend their whole lives avoiding. There was a man who had everything people admire from a distance. Respect. Attention. A circle of people who laughed at his jokes, who called his name, who needed him. If you saw him from the outside, you'd think he had it all figured out. The kind of life many chase. But every night, when the noise faded and the world went quiet, he sat alone with a feeling he couldn't explain. Not sadness exactly. Not failure. Just a quiet dissatisfaction that refused to leave. He tried to ignore it. He filled his time, his phone, his space. More conversations, more distractions, more effort poured into everyone else. Because as long as he was needed, he didn't have to face the one thing that made him uncomfortable. Himself. And that's where most people get trapped. You think your problem is out there. You think it's the people who don't appreciate you enough. The opportunities you haven't gotten. The love you haven't received. But what if none of that is the real issue? What if the real problem is this? You've built a life where everyone has access to you, except you. You show up for others. You invest in others. You think about others. But when it comes to yourself, you postpone. You neglect. You avoid. And over time, something dangerous happens. You begin to measure your worth by how others treat you. If they respond, you feel valued. If they ignore you, you feel invisible. If they leave, you feel broken. Do you see the pattern? Your entire sense of self becomes dependent on people who were never meant to carry that responsibility. This is why you feel unstable. Because you've handed over your identity to things you cannot control. The Stoics warned about this long before our time. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the danger of placing your peace in external hands. He understood something most people learn too late. The more you rely on others to define you, the less you know who you are. And when you don't know who you are, you accept anything. Any treatment. Any relationship. Any version of yourself that keeps people around. That's not strength. That's survival. And survival will keep you stuck in a life that feels just good enough to tolerate, but never great enough to fulfill you. The man eventually reached a breaking point. Not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing changed. Same routine. Same effort. Same emptiness. And one night, sitting in silence, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. If everyone disappeared tomorrow, who would I be? No roles. No expectations. No one to impress. Just him. He didn't have an answer. And that terrified him. Because in that moment, he realized something brutally honest. He had spent years becoming someone others could love. But never someone he could respect. That's where everything begins to shift. Not when you gain more. Not when people start treating you better. But when you finally confront the truth you've been avoiding. You don't need more from the world. You need more from yourself. This is the point most people turn away. Because it's easier to blame. Easier to distract. Easier to continue the cycle. But if you stay, if you lean into this discomfort, you start to see things differently. You start to understand that self-love isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about honesty. It's about looking at your life without filters, without excuses, and asking, am I living in a way that earns my own respect? Because that's the standard that changes everything. Not how people see you. Not how many approve of you. But how you see yourself when no one is watching. And here's where it gets deeper. Because once you ask that question, you can't go back to who you were before. That question doesn't leave you. It follows you into your daily routine, into your conversations, into the quiet moments where there's nothing left to distract you. Am I living in a way that earns my own respect? At first, you might try to ignore it. You go back to what's familiar. You scroll, you talk, you laugh, you pretend everything is fine. But something has changed now. the illusion is broken. You start noticing things you once overlooked. The way you say yes when you want to say no. The way you tolerate behavior that slowly drains you. The way you delay your own growth but show up instantly for everyone else. And for the first time, it doesn't sit right with you anymore. Because deep down, you know the truth. Every time you abandon yourself, you feel it. Not immediately. Not loudly. But quietly, consistently. Like a slow leak you can't see, but over time, it empties you. This is the cost of not loving yourself. Not dramatic pain, but a gradual loss of identity. And here's where most people misunderstand everything. They think self-love means affirmations, comfort, and always being kind to yourself. But that's only a small part of it. Real self-love is discipline. It's choosing what is right for you, even when it's uncomfortable. It's setting boundaries, even when it risks losing people. It's walking away, even when you still care. That's not easy. In fact, it goes against everything you've been conditioned to do. You've been taught to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to be liked. But at what cost? Your peace, your time, your self-respect. There comes a moment where you have to decide. Do I want to be liked, or do I want to be whole? Because you can't always have both. And this is where your life begins to change. Not overnight, but through small, quiet decisions that most people will never notice. You start saying no without over-explaining. You stop chasing people who only value you when it's convenient. You begin to invest your time in things that actually move your life forward. At first, it feels strange, uncomfortable, even lonely. Because the version of you that everyone was used to is disappearing. And not everyone will like that. Some will question you. Some will distance themselves. Some will try to pull you back into who you used to be. Not because they hate you, but because your growth disrupts the role you used to play in their lives. And this is where many people fail. They mistake discomfort for something being wrong. So they go back. Back to old habits. Back to old patterns. Back to being someone they've outgrown. But if you hold your ground, something powerful happens. You begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself. Not based on feelings, but based on actions. You keep promises to yourself. You show up even when you don't feel like it. You choose long-term respect over short-term comfort. And slowly, something shifts. You start trusting yourself. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know you won't abandon yourself anymore. This is where real confidence comes from. Not from praise, not from attention, but from knowing, I've got myself. And when you reach that point, everything changes. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop fearing rejection the same way. You stop settling for things that don't align with who you're becoming. Because you've built something most people never do. An internal foundation that doesn't shake easily. And once you have that, you don't chase love anymore. You choose it. But here's the part no one tells you. Loving yourself more than anyone else doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop losing yourself in the process of caring. There's a difference. A big one. And understanding that difference is what separates people who live with quiet strength from those who spend their lives searching for something outside themselves that was always meant to be built within. And this is only the beginning. Because once you start choosing yourself, you'll face a test that will challenge everything you think you've learned. That test doesn't arrive with a warning. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, disguised as something familiar. A person who once had access to you. A situation you thought you had outgrown. A moment that pulls on the version of you you're trying to leave behind. And suddenly, everything you've been building gets challenged. Not in theory, but in reality. Because it's easy to talk about self-worth when everything is calm. It's easy to choose yourself when there's no pressure. But what happens when it actually matters? When someone you care about starts pulling you back into old patterns. When saying no means risking a relationship. When choosing yourself feels like you might lose something important. That's the moment. That's the test. Most people fail here. Not because they're weak, but because they're not prepared. They think growth is about feeling stronger. But real growth is about acting differently, even when you don't feel strong. So the moment comes. You feel the urge to go back. To explain yourself. To compromise your boundaries just this once. Your mind starts negotiating. Maybe it's not that serious. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just keep the peace. But deep down, you know exactly what this moment represents. It's not about them. It's about you. It's about whether you truly believe what you've been telling yourself. Because every time you choose comfort over self-respect, you send yourself a message. I am not a priority. And that message compounds. Over time, it becomes your identity. But if you pause, just for a second, and you sit with that discomfort instead of escaping it, you realize something powerful. You don't actually need to go back. You're just used to it. There's a difference. And in that space, in that small gap between impulse and action, you have a choice. A real one. To repeat the past. Or to become someone new. This is where the Stoics were relentless in their thinking. Epictetus taught that external events are not what define us, but how we respond to them is everything. Not what happens to you, but what you do next. That's where your power is. So you take a breath. Not to calm down, but to decide. And maybe your voice shakes. Maybe your heart races. Maybe part of you still wants to go back. But you don't. You hold your ground. You say what needs to be said. Or you walk away when words are no longer necessary. And in that moment, something shifts. Not around you. Within you. It's subtle. But undeniable. You feel it. A sense of alignment. Like, for the first time in a long time, your actions match who you're trying to become. And that feeling, it's different from anything external validation can give you. It's quiet. But it's solid. Because you didn't betray yourself. And that's where self-love becomes real. Not in what you say to yourself, but in what you refuse to tolerate. That one decision won't change everything overnight. But it changes something more important. Your standard. And once your standard changes, your life has no choice but to follow. You start seeing things clearly. What once felt acceptable, now feels heavy. What once felt normal, now feels limiting. You outgrow conversations. You outgrow environments. You even outgrow parts of your own identity. And that can feel isolating. Because growth often creates distance. Not just from others, but from who you used to be. And there's a moment in that process where you feel like you're in between worlds. Not who you were. Not fully who you're becoming. Just in transition. That's where many people panic. They rush back to what's familiar just to feel stable again. But if you stay there, if you allow yourself to be in that space without running, you begin to understand something most people never do. You don't need to have everything figured out to move forward. You just need to stop betraying yourself. That's it. That's the foundation. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, you start building something unshakable. Not perfection, but integrity. And from that place, your life begins to take a different direction. Not louder, not flashier, but stronger, more intentional, more aligned. And eventually, you become someone who no longer asks, do they value me? Because you already answered a more important question. Do I value myself? And once that answer becomes yes, everything else becomes a choice. Not a need. Not a dependency. A choice. And that changes everything. Because when you love yourself more than anyone else, you don't lose people. You lose what was never right for you. And what remains finally meets you at your level. And when your life starts to align like that, something unexpected happens. You become calm. Not because everything around you is perfect, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. For so long, your energy was divided. Part of you wanted growth. Another part wanted comfort. Part of you wanted respect. Another part feared losing people. So you stayed stuck in the middle. Moving, but not progressing. Trying, but not transforming. But now, that internal conflict begins to fade. Because your decisions are no longer based on fear. They're based on clarity. You know what you tolerate. You know what you accept. And more importantly, you know what you walk away from. This is the kind of peace most people misunderstand. They think peace is found in silence, in comfort, in avoiding problems. But real peace? It comes from alignment. From knowing that no matter what happens around you, you won't turn against yourself to make it easier. And that kind of peace is powerful. Because it makes you steady. Not cold. Not distant. Just grounded. You start listening more than you speak. You observe more than you react. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth. Because you've already established it within yourself. This is where your presence changes. People notice it. Not always consciously. But they feel it. There's something different about you. You're not chasing attention anymore. You're not over-explaining. You're not trying to be understood by everyone. And ironically, that's what makes people start paying attention. Because you're no longer operating from lack. You're operating from fullness. This is what Seneca meant when he spoke about inner sufficiency, the idea that a person who has mastered themselves is no longer dependent on external conditions to feel complete. You become self-contained. Not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that frees you. You can love people without needing them. You can give without emptying yourself. You can walk away without collapsing. And that changes how you experience everything. Relationships become choices, not lifelines. Time becomes valuable, not something you waste trying to fill emptiness. Even solitude feels different. It's no longer something you escape from. It's something you use. To think. To reflect. To strengthen your mind. Because now, being alone doesn't mean being incomplete. It means being undistracted. And in that space, you begin to see yourself clearly. Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the version created to please others. But the real you. The one that was always there. Just buried under years of compromise and conditioning. And when you finally connect with that version of yourself, something clicks. You stop searching. Not because you have everything, but because you are no longer lost. And that's a different kind of fulfillment. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But it's steady. It stays with you. Through success. Through failure. Through change. Because it's not built on circumstances. It's built on who you've become. And here's the truth most people don't realize until much later. Loving yourself more than anyone else is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a different life. A life where you are no longer reacting to everything that happens to you, but intentionally shaping who you are becoming. And from that place, you don't just exist. You live with direction. With purpose. With a sense of control that doesn't come from forcing the world, but from mastering yourself within it. And if you followed this far, then you already feel it. Something inside you has shifted. Even if it's small. Even if you can't fully explain it yet. That's how it starts. Quietly. But once it begins, it doesn't stop. Because now you've seen what's possible. And you can't unsee it. So the only question left is this. What kind of person are you going to be, from this point forward? Because the answer to that question is no longer something you wait to discover. It's something you decide. One action at a time. One boundary at a time. One moment of choosing yourself. Over and over again. And that's how you build a life most people only talk about, but never truly live. And the truth is, this is where most people quietly drift back. Not because they didn't understand. Not because they didn't feel something shift. But because consistency is harder than inspiration. It's easy to feel powerful while listening to words like these. It's harder when life returns to normal. When your phone lights up with the same names. When your routine pulls you back into old habits. When nobody around you acknowledges the change you're trying to make. That's when the real work begins. Because self-love is not a moment. It's a pattern. A standard you repeat, especially when no one is watching. There will be days you feel strong. Days where everything makes sense, where your mind is clear, where your actions align effortlessly. And then there will be days where it doesn't. Days where you feel tired. Where doubt creeps back in. Where the old version of you starts whispering again. Maybe this is too much. Maybe I should go back to how things were. That voice doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're changing. And change always creates resistance. This is where discipline becomes your anchor. Not motivation. Not feelings. Discipline. The ability to follow through on what you know is right, regardless of how you feel in the moment. This is what separates people who transform their lives from those who only talk about it. Because anyone can feel inspired. But not everyone can stay consistent when the feeling fades. And that's why your daily actions matter more than your intentions. It's in the small things. Choosing not to respond when you know it leads nowhere. Showing up for yourself even when it's inconvenient. Holding your boundaries even when it feels uncomfortable. These moments don't look significant. But they are. Because they build your identity. And identity is what determines your life. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. So if your habits reflect self-respect, your life will eventually reflect it too. This is how you become unshakable. Not by avoiding difficulty, but by becoming someone who can handle it without losing themselves. And over time, something powerful happens. The things that once triggered you don't affect you the same way. The situations that once drained you lose their grip. The people who once had control over your emotions no longer do. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You've raised your internal standard. And once that standard is set, you don't negotiate it anymore. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it lasting. Because you're no longer depending on reminders, motivation, or external pressure to stay aligned. You've built it into who you are. And at that point, loving yourself more than anyone else is no longer something you try to do. It's something you naturally embody. In how you speak. In how you move. In what you allow. It becomes effortless, not because it's easy, but because it's now part of your nature. And this is where your life begins to feel different in a way words can't fully capture. There's less noise in your mind. Less urgency to prove something. Less need to chase what was never meant for you. You become selective. Intentional. Calm in a way that doesn't need explanation. And people will notice. Some will respect it. Some will misunderstand it. Some may even be uncomfortable with it. But that's no longer your concern. Because you've stopped living for their perception. You've started living in alignment with your truth. And that is freedom. Not the kind that comes from having everything, but the kind that comes from needing less. Because you've already found what matters within yourself. So from here, there's nothing left to chase. Only something to maintain. To protect. To continue building, one decision at a time. And if you've made it this far, then you already know. You're not going back to who you used to be. Because now you've experienced something deeper than comfort. You've experienced clarity. And once you have that, you don't settle for confusion again. So keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep building a life that reflects your worth. not your fears. And if this message has spoken to something real within you, if you see yourself differently now, even in the smallest way, subscribe to this channel. Because this is not where it ends. This is where it begins. A different mindset. A different standard. A different way of living that most people never fully step into. But you can. And you will. If you continue choosing yourself. Again and again. Until it becomes who you are. And one day, you'll notice something almost surreal. The things that used to confuse you, no longer do. The people you once struggled to understand, the situations that once kept you overthinking for hours, the emotions that once overwhelmed you. They all become clear. Not because the world suddenly makes more sense, but because you do. You see, when you truly begin to love yourself more than anyone else, your perception sharpens. You stop interpreting everything through fear, insecurity, or the need to be accepted. You start seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were. And that changes everything. You no longer chase mixed signals. You no longer overanalyze silence. You no longer hold on to potential instead of reality. Because your standards are no longer negotiable. You've experienced what it feels like to be aligned with yourself. And you refuse to go back to confusion. This is the level where emotional maturity begins to show. Not in what you say, but in what you no longer entertain. You don't argue to prove a point. You don't beg to be understood. You don't force connections that clearly don't flow. Instead, you observe. You decide. And if necessary, you walk away. Silently. Without drama. Without needing closure from someone who was never capable of giving it to you. That kind of strength is rare. Because it requires something most people avoid. Letting go without explanation. Not because you don't care. But because you care enough about yourself not to stay where you're not valued. And this is where your energy becomes protected. You stop pouring into people who don't pour into you. You stop investing in situations that have no return. You stop trying to fix what was never your responsibility. And suddenly, you have more time, more focus, more clarity. Because your energy is no longer scattered. It's directed, intentional, aligned. This is what real power looks like. Not loud, not aggressive, but controlled. And the more you operate from this place, the more your life starts to reflect it. You attract better opportunities. You connect with people who actually respect you. You create a life that feels stable, not chaotic. Not because you got lucky, but because you stopped accepting less. That's the shift. And here's something even deeper. You stop taking things personally. Not in a careless way, but in a grounded, self-assured way. You understand that people act based on who they are, not who you are. Their inconsistency is not your inadequacy. Their distance is not your deficiency. Their inability to see your worth does not reduce it. And once that truly clicks, you become free in a way that's hard to explain. Because you're no longer carrying what was never yours to begin with. You're no longer trying to control what you never could. You're simply focused on what's within your power. This is a principle echoed again and again in Stoic thought. Epictetus emphasized that some things are up to us, and some things are not. Your thoughts, your actions, your standards, those are yours. Other people's opinions, their behavior, their choices, not yours. And when you fully accept that, you stop wasting energy where it doesn't belong. You redirect it inward, into growth, into discipline, into becoming someone you genuinely respect. And from that place, your life becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You know what matters. You know what doesn't. You know when to stay. And you know when to leave. No confusion. No hesitation. Just quiet certainty. And that certainty is what most people spend their entire lives searching for. But it was never something to be found outside. It was always something to be built within. So as you move forward from here, remember this. Loving yourself more than anyone else is not selfish. It's necessary. Because when you finally become whole on your own, you stop expecting others to complete you. And that's when you can truly connect. Not from need, but from strength. Not from fear, but from clarity. And that's the kind of life that not only feels different, but is different at its core. And now, everything you do from this point on has a different weight, a different intention, a different standard. Because you're no longer trying to become someone. You already are. Now you're just living like it. And at this stage, something subtle but powerful begins to take root. You stop asking for permission. Not out loud, but internally. You no longer wait for someone to validate your choices before you make them. You no longer hesitate because you're worried about how it will be perceived. You no longer shrink just to make others comfortable. Because deep down, you've accepted something that changes everything. You are responsible for your life. Not partially. Completely. And once you accept that, excuses lose their power. You stop blaming your past. You stop waiting for the right time. You stop expecting someone else to come and fix what only you can build. That level of ownership is rare. Because it's heavy. It forces you to confront yourself in ways most people avoid. Your habits. Your patterns. Your decisions. All of it. No filters. No distractions. Just truth. And truth isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it reveals that you've been the one holding yourself back. That you've been choosing what's easy over what's necessary. That you've been settling, not because you had to, but because it felt familiar. But here's the difference now. You don't run from that realization. You use it. You take that awareness, and you turn it into action. You start correcting what you can. Not perfectly, but consistently. And that's what creates real change. Because self-love at this level is no longer just about boundaries or mindset. It becomes structure. How you spend your time. How you manage your energy. How you move through your day when no one is watching. This is where your life starts to feel intentional. You wake up with direction. You move with purpose. You make decisions based on who you're becoming, not who you used to be. And the more you operate like this, the more confident you become. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself, because it's built on proof. You've seen yourself change. You've watched your habits improve. You've experienced what it feels like to follow through on your own word. And that builds something unbreakable. Self-trust. Once you trust yourself, fear loses its grip. Because even if things don't go as planned, you know you'll handle it. You know you won't fall apart. You know you won't abandon yourself when things get difficult. And that knowledge gives you a kind of freedom most people never experience. You start taking risks. You start stepping into opportunities you once avoided. You start living in a way that actually reflects your potential. Not perfectly, but honestly. And that honesty becomes your edge. Because while most people are still pretending, still performing, still trying to be something they're not, you've become real, grounded, clear, aligned. And that's what makes your presence different. That's what makes your life different. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because you've done the work most people delay. You faced yourself. You challenged yourself. You chose yourself. Again and again, even when it was uncomfortable. And now, you're no longer chasing a version of yourself. You're building it. Deliberately. Patiently. Day by day. And as you continue on this path, you'll realize something that once felt impossible. You don't need to become someone else to feel worthy. You just needed to stop abandoning who you already are. That's it. That's the shift. Simple, but not easy. And that's why so few people reach this point. But you're here. You've stayed. You've listened. You've reflected. And that matters. Because awareness is where everything begins. So from here, there's only one thing left to do. Live it. Not just think about it. Not just feel inspired by it. But apply it. In your choices. In your habits. In your standards. Every single day. And if you do that, you won't just understand self-love. You'll embody it. Fully. And once you reach that level, there's nothing left to prove. Only a life to live. On your terms. And eventually, you arrive at a place that feels almost unfamiliar. Not because it's new, but because you've never allowed yourself to stay here long enough before. A place where you're no longer chasing, proving, or forcing anything. You're simply living. Decisions become clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Because you're no longer choosing based on fear of loss, you're choosing based on alignment. Does this respect who I'm becoming? That becomes your filter. And it simplifies everything. You don't waste time going back and forth. You don't drain yourself trying to make something work that clearly doesn't. You don't ignore red flags just because you feel something. Because now, you understand. Feelings can be real, and still be misleading. And that awareness protects you. It keeps you grounded when emotions try to pull you off track. It keeps you focused when distractions show up disguised as opportunities. It keeps you steady when life tests your patience. This is what inner strength looks like in its most refined form. Not reacting to everything. Not resisting everything. But responding, with intention. And that level of control changes how you move through the world. You become patient. Not because you're waiting, but because you're no longer desperate. You trust timing. You trust your process. You trust yourself. And that trust removes pressure. You don't feel the need to rush success. You don't feel the need to force connections. You don't feel the need to prove your worth through constant action. Because you've already done the most important work. You've established it within yourself. So now, everything you build from here is built on solid ground. Your relationships are healthier. Because you're no longer entering them from a place of lack. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who complements what you've already built. And that changes the dynamic completely. There's no desperation. No imbalance. No silent toleration of things you know don't align with you. There's clarity. Mutual respect. Choice. And if that's not there, you're okay walking away. Not bitter. Not angry. Just certain. Because you understand that protecting your peace is more valuable than maintaining something that disrupts it. This is the level where your life becomes quieter, but more powerful. Less noise. Less chaos. Less confusion. And in that quiet, you finally hear yourself clearly. Your thoughts. Your intuition. Your direction. You're no longer drowning them out with distractions or opinions. You're listening. And that connection with yourself becomes your greatest advantage. Because while others are still looking outward for answers, you've learned to look within. And that's where real guidance comes from. So as you stand at this point in your journey, there's nothing dramatic left to chase. No sudden transformation. No overnight change. Just a steady evolution. A consistent commitment to yourself. To your growth. To your standards. To your peace. And that's how it lasts. Not through intensity, but through consistency. Day after day. Choice after choice. Until one day, you don't even recognize the person you used to be. Not because you've erased them, but because you've outgrown them. And you'll look back, not with regret, but with understanding. Because that version of you was necessary. They carried you to this point. They taught you what you needed to learn. They showed you what happens when you don't choose yourself. And now, you do. Without hesitation. Without guilt. Without fear. And that is where everything finally comes together. Not perfectly, but truthfully. Because your life is no longer built on what you lack, but on what you've decided to become. So from here on, keep it simple. Keep it real. Keep choosing yourself. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Because that's what separates a temporary change from a permanent transformation. And if this message has stayed with you this far, if something in you feels different, even if you can't explain it, subscribe to this channel. Because this isn't just content. It's a reminder A standard. A way of thinking that will continue to challenge you, sharpen you, and strengthen you. As long as you're willing to apply it. And now, you already know what to do. Not because someone told you, but because you've finally decided to become someone you can respect every single day. And if you stay on this path long enough, you'll notice a shift that most people never experience. You stop needing closure. Not because everything ends perfectly, but because you no longer rely on others to give you peace. There was a time when unanswered questions would stay in your mind for days. You'd replay conversations. You'd analyze every detail. You'd search for meaning in silence, trying to understand why something happened, or why someone acted the way they did. But now, you don't chase explanations the same way, because you've realized something deeper. Closure is not something you receive. It's something you create. Within yourself. You accept what is. Not because you like it, but because you respect your peace more than your curiosity. And that changes how you move on. You don't carry emotional weight that doesn't belong to you. You don't wait for apologies that may never come. You don't hold on to connections that have already ended in reality, just not in your mind. You let go. Fully. Cleanly. Without dragging pieces of the past into your present. And that's a different kind of freedom. Because your mind is no longer crowded. No unfinished stories. No lingering attachments. No constant mental noise pulling you backwards. Just clarity. Just space. Just forward movement. And in that space, you grow faster. Stronger. Sharper. Because your energy is no longer divided. It's focused. Directed toward your life, not your past. This is where your priorities become undeniable. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your attention matters. And you stop giving those things away carelessly. Not out of selfishness, but out of awareness. Because you understand the cost now. You felt what it's like to lose yourself. And you refuse to go back there again. So you protect what you've built. Quietly. Consistently. Without needing to explain it to anyone. And this protection is not about shutting people out. It's about letting the right things in. Because when you love yourself at this level, your standards don't just rise. They become non-negotiable. You don't lower them to keep people. You don't ignore them to avoid being alone. You don't question them just because someone disagrees. You honor them. Every time. And that's what shapes your life moving forward. Not luck. Not circumstances. But your standards. Because your standards determine what you allow, what you accept, and ultimately, what you become. So from here, life becomes less about figuring everything out, and more about staying aligned with what you already know. You know what drains you. You know what builds you. You know what aligns with you. The only question is, will you continue to choose it? Not once. Not when it's convenient. But consistently. Because that's where the real difference is made. In repetition. In discipline. In the quiet moments where no one is watching. But you still choose yourself anyway. And if you can do that, if you can stay consistent in that choice, then everything else begins to fall into place. Not magically, but naturally. Because you've removed the chaos. You've removed the confusion. You've removed the habits that kept you stuck. And what's left is a clear path forward. A life that reflects your values. A mindset that supports your growth. A version of you that is grounded, stable, and real. And from that place, you don't just exist in your life. You lead it. With intention. With clarity. With control. And that's something no one can take from you. Because it wasn't given to you. You built it. Through every decision. Every boundary. Every moment you chose self-respect over comfort. So as this journey continues, remember this. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to remain aligned. Because alignment is what keeps you steady. Alignment is what keeps you grounded. Alignment is what keeps you moving forward. No matter what happens around you. And if you've made it this far, then you're not just listening anymore. You're becoming. And that is where everything truly begins. And at some point, without even realizing when it happened, you become the person you once needed. Not in theory. Not in words. But in how you show up every single day. You become the one who keeps going when things feel heavy. The one who sets the standard when others lower theirs. The one who walks away when something no longer aligns. The same strength you once searched for in others, you now carry within yourself. And that changes how you see your past. You stop resenting it. You stop wishing it was different. Because you understand now. Everything you went through forced you to build this version of yourself. The one who no longer tolerates confusion. The one who no longer begs for clarity. The one who no longer waits to be chosen. You choose yourself. Fully. And without hesitation. This is where your life becomes yours again. Not influenced by pressure. Not shaped by fear. Not controlled by the need to be accepted. But guided by something stronger. Self-respect. And self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need to be proven. It's seen in your actions. In what you allow. In what you reject. In how you carry yourself when no one is watching. That's where it lives. And once it's built, it doesn't leave. It stays with you. Through every phase of your life. Through success and failure. Through gain and loss. Through moments of certainty and moments of doubt. Because it's no longer dependent on circumstances. It's part of who you are. And from that place, you don't fear being alone. You don't fear starting over. You don't fear losing people who cannot meet you at your level. Because you've already proven something to yourself. You can rebuild. You can adjust. You can continue. Without losing who you are. And that confidence is unshakable. Not because nothing will ever go wrong. But because you know you'll be okay even when it does. That's the difference. That's the level most people never reach. Because they never commit to themselves long enough to build it. But you did. You stayed. You listened. You reflected. And most importantly, you applied it. Step by step. Choice by choice. Until it became natural. Until it became you. So now, as everything begins to settle, as your life becomes more aligned, more intentional, more real, there's nothing left to chase. No identity to prove. No validation to seek. No emptiness to fill. Just a life to live. A life built on your standards. A life guided by your values. A life protected by your discipline. And that life is different. Because it's yours. Completely. And if there's one thing to carry with you from all of this, let it be this. You don't find your worth. You decide it. Then you live in a way that proves it. Every single day. So keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep building a life that reflects the standard you've set. And never lower it. Just to make something, or someone, fit. Because you already know what happens when you do. You've lived it. And you've outgrown it. Now, there's only one direction left. Forward. As someone who finally understands that loving yourself more than anyone else is not just a mindset. It's a way of life. And as you move forward from here, there's one final shift that separates those who understand this message from those who truly live it. You stop identifying with your past self. Not in a way that denies what you've been through, but in a way that refuses to be limited by it. Because for a long time, your identity was built on what happened to you. The mistakes. The rejection. The moments you didn't choose yourself. And without realizing it, you carried those versions of yourself into your present. You saw yourself through old experiences. You judged yourself based on outdated decisions. You hesitated, because a part of you still believed you were that person. But now, you see it differently. You understand that who you were was a phase, not a definition. And that realization is powerful. Because it frees you. It allows you to move without dragging your past behind you. It allows you to act without constantly second-guessing yourself. It allows you to grow without feeling like you're betraying who you used to be. You're not betraying them. You're evolving beyond them. And that's what growth actually is. Not becoming someone completely new, but becoming more aligned with who you were meant to be all along. So you stop saying things like, "That's just how I am. I've always been like this. I don't think I can change." Because you know better now. You've already proven to yourself that change is possible. You've already seen what happens when you raise your standards, protect your energy, and choose yourself consistently. So you no longer limit yourself with old beliefs. You replace them with actions, with discipline, with a new identity that reflects who you are becoming. And this is where your life opens up in a way that feels almost unreal. Because you're no longer stuck in repetition. You're creating. You're designing your habits. You're shaping your mindset. You're building a life that actually reflects your values. And that gives you a level of control most people never experience. Not control over everything, but control over what matters. Your direction. your decisions, your standards. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because once you have that, you don't feel lost anymore. You don't feel stuck. You don't feel like life is happening to you. You feel like you're part of it. Actively. Intentionally. And that changes everything. Because now, even challenges feel different. They're no longer obstacles meant to stop you. They're situations meant to refine you. To test your discipline. To strengthen your mindset. To confirm that you're still aligned with the person you've chosen to become. And when those challenges come, you don't panic. You don't collapse. You respond. With calm. With clarity. With control. Because you've built that within yourself. And no external situation can take that away. So as this journey continues, understand this. There is no finish line. No final destination where everything suddenly becomes perfect. There's only progression. There's only growth. There's only the continuous decision to remain aligned with your values, your standards, and your self-respect. Every day. In every situation. No exceptions. And that's what makes it real. That's what makes it lasting. Because you're no longer depending on temporary motivation. You're operating from a permanent shift in who you are. So from here on, live it fully. Walk with it. Think with it. Act with it. Let it show in your decisions. Let it show in your boundaries. Let it show in the life you continue to build. And if you've been here from the beginning, if you've stayed through every word, every realization, every shift, then you already know. This isn't just a message. It's a turning point. One that most people will hear. But only a few will actually apply. Be one of the few. And if you're ready to continue growing, thinking deeper, and building a mindset that sets you apart, subscribe to this channel. Because this is not the end. It's the foundation of everything that comes next. A different way of thinking. A different way of living. A different version of you. That refuses to settle for anything less than what you know you're capable of becoming. And now, you don't need to wait for the right moment anymore. You are the moment. So move forward. With clarity, with discipline, and with the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands their worth. And refuses to live beneath it. And as everything you've heard settles into you, there's one truth that remains, simple, but unforgiving. No one is coming to save you. Not in the way you once hoped. No person will arrive and suddenly give your life direction. No opportunity will appear and magically fix your habits. No moment will come where everything aligns perfectly and makes the work easy. That idea, as comforting as it once felt, keeps people stuck. Because it delays action. It creates dependence. It makes you wait, instead of build. But now, you see it differently. You understand that the life you want, the peace you're searching for, the respect you crave, is built, not given. And that realization doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. Because it puts the power back where it belongs. In your hands. You stop waiting. You stop hoping things will change on their own. You start moving. Even when it's slow. even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one notices. Because you're no longer doing it for recognition. You're doing it because you've decided. This is who I am now. Someone who shows up. Someone who follows through. Someone who doesn't abandon themselves when things get difficult. And that identity is what carries you forward. Not motivation. Not inspiration. Identity. Because when something becomes part of who you are, you don't negotiate with it. You don't question it every time it gets hard. You live it. Consistently. And that's what makes the difference over time. Not one big decision, but 1,000 small ones. Choosing discipline over distraction. Choosing growth over comfort. Choosing self-respect over temporary satisfaction. Again. And again. And again. Until one day, it's no longer a choice you struggle with. It's just what you do. And that's when you realize you've changed. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But fundamentally. In how you think. In how you act. In how you carry yourself through life. And from that point on, everything you build is different. Because it's built by someone who knows their worth. Someone who doesn't need to prove anything, but still puts in the work. Someone who doesn't chase validation, but still moves with purpose. Someone who doesn't fear being alone, because they've become their own foundation. That's you now. Or at least, that's who you're becoming. And the only thing left is to continue. No breaks in your standard. No compromises in your values. No returning to what you've already outgrown. Just forward movement. Steady. Intentional. Unshaken. Because you've already done the hardest part. You've decided. So now, live like it. Every day. In every action. In every choice. And let your life become proof that loving yourself more than anyone else was never selfish. It was necessary. And if you're still here, then you didn't just listen. You understood. So take that understanding and turn it into something real. Something visible. Something that reflects in the way you live. And if you're committed to becoming that version of yourself, not occasionally, but consistently, subscribe to this channel. Because this is more than content. It's a standard you carry with you. A reminder of who you've chosen to become. And a path that, once you walk it long enough, leads you somewhere most people never reach. A life where you don't just exist. You respect the person living it. This all comes down to one thing. Not motivation. Not inspiration. Not even knowledge. A decision. Everything you've heard, every realization, every shift, every moment of clarity, means nothing if it stays in your mind and never enters your life. Because understanding doesn't change you. Action does. And now, you're at a point where things are clear. You know what drains you. You know what lowers your standards. You know where you've been abandoning yourself. There's no confusion anymore. So the question is no longer, what should I do? The question is, will I do it? Will you choose self-respect when it's uncomfortable? Will you maintain your standards when it costs you something? Will you stay consistent when no one is watching? Because that's what loving yourself more than anyone else actually looks like. It's not a feeling. It's a pattern. A way of living where your actions consistently reflect your worth. Where you don't need reminders to do what's right for you, because you've made it part of who you are. And here's the clarity most people avoid. If you keep choosing comfort over growth, nothing changes. If you keep lowering your standards, nothing improves. If you keep waiting for the right time, you stay exactly where you are. There is no perfect moment. There is only this one. So from here, keep it simple. Choose what builds you. Walk away from what breaks you. Stay aligned with what you already know is right. Not occasionally. Consistently. That's how your life changes. Not in one big move, but in the small decisions you repeat every day. And if you do that long enough, you won't need motivation anymore. You'll look at your life and realize you became someone you respect. Not because it was easy, but because you refused to settle for less. So move forward with that. No overthinking. No hesitation. No returning to what you've outgrown. Just action. And if this message gave you clarity, real clarity, subscribe to this channel. Because this is not about temporary motivation. It's about building a mindset that stays with you long after this video ends.